Now, let us do the format of report. What should be the format of report? How format is the formatting, how it has to be written, what are the aspects that needs to be kept in mind when we say format of report. So you see here at a glance, again there's a preview that I've given you here, is like, how it goes about. So there are several parts to a report, and it always enables the writers to lay out all the complex informations, and the form is always given. Any organization will always give the form of its report, and here this glimpse that I've given you here is a complete report format. But at times we did not include all these points here, like the structure that is mentioned here, starting from the title page to abstract to table of contents to introduction to method to results to discussion to conclusions, recommendations, reference list, and appendices. So sometimes this structure might be omitted, certain parts of the structure might be omitted, so this is important, but of course the title is important, signature is important, certain aspects of reports are important and certain aspects can be omitted. So there's no set writing, there's no one set we can say or one format we can say that the report is written. It varies, and certain industries take certain sections, other industry omit certain sections, so it depends. So just as you have the essays, you have the reports are also written in sections. You have the headings, you have the subheadings, and everything is numbered. And there are various formats. Of course, it is there for writing a report, and it depends. What is your context? What is your topic? Which place are you in? Which industry are you in? And it is very specific to context, place, people, industry, etc. So components of a report. Now what are the components of the parts of a report? So the first part is like the first page would be something like this that you can see here. The name of the university, for example. Then you have the title, and then you have the author, you have the supervisor, and you have the date. So name of the author is there, name of the supervisor is there, and you have the date. So title page always is the name, your name and the name of the tutor to whom it is being submitted to. So report is always written it is written by one person and submitted to the other person. So that names have to be mentioned. The logo of the organization is very important. That needs to be mentioned, that needs to be present there. And any acknowledgement in any form, list of people and list of, and organizations who've helped you, compile this report. So you have to acknowledge them, you have to thank them, that they have helped you in the completion of your work. Then we have the content page. So what is the content? Is you write the content is basically the information that you need to give, the message that you need to give. So it has to be very well formatted. List of all the sections needs to be mentioned, subsections of the report, page numbers have to be marked, that has to be formatted, very well formatted. And here we also have to keep in mind the font size has to be there, what and the kind of font that we need to follow. The margins needs to be kept, it has to be neatly typed, and it has to be very clear, very concise. All these things have to be kept in mind. And if supposedly an abstract is needed, so abstract also needs to be presented. For example, if it's a documentary of anything, one has to put in the abstract. Abstract is basically has various headings are there. So abstract can have that's the first page. The second page, obviously we have the first page where we have the name and the receiver, the sender, the logo, and the second page can have the abstract. So abstract is a brief summary of all the major points. So it can have the aims and objectives, it can have 2-3 lines on whatever the message or the discussions that will ensue. It can also have the findings, and it has the conclusion, it has the recommendation at a glance. It is a form of a summary. Then we actually start with the report writing. So first part of the report writing is introduction. The first page needs to have an introduction. So because you need to pen down first is the problem. You have to tell the reader what the report is all about. This is important. Then you have the body. So the body is basically the main section of the report. Every point that you need to, pen down and need to inform has to be written, and has to be written in a chronological way. And there could be, you can divide this into several sections, and every section can have a subtitle also. And you can also have a review of literature also is there. Why? Because if it is a kind of a, a thesis, or if it is a kind of, a dissertation thesis, then we need to also mention the different types of literatures, that the researcher has read, and what different types of, literature that you've read has enabled you, to collect your matter. What are the, secondary data that have helped you to collect your matter? So you need to also write down on the literature that you collected and that literature that you read. So materials and methods that you followed. Methods could be, there are various methodologies that one follow. So if you're doing a kind of a research, you can always follow, like if it is a survey, if it is experimental, if it is descriptive, if it is ethnographic, that needs to be mentioned. Results has to be, if it is an experimental, report, any experiment has been conducted and you are writing a report on it, then you have to also write down the result on it. So our discussion is, the main body has to have everything. It has to have findings also, it has to have significance also, and then lastly we have the conclusion. So it gives you all the findings. The conclusion has to do with the findings, with all the deductions. So you first that you make a hypothesis, the possibilities, and then in conclusion you mention whether the hypothesis has been true or it has been false, whether the desired results has been met with or has not met with. So it has its own you have to mention the significance, the relevance of the study, all that is, that needs to be mentioned in conclusion. Reference all the listings of all the detailings of all the sources, that you have read, that you've come across, and that have helped you, in making your text, in writing your text, in writing your report. So references is again a very important part of, any report writing. But this is very specific when we talk about, because this is by and large. So this is a very larger view that, we are giving you here as to the steps and the steps to writing a report. This is very specific in the academic settings, when we have to write almost the literature review is also there, the methodology is also there, and the sources and bibliography and citations and references and table of contents, like it has to have everything. But when we talk about organization, at the organizational level, in a very formal settings, we also, the report writing is constantly happening, and in a formal setting, certain aspects can be omitted, certain aspects can be deleted. Depends upon the industry. So basically report writing is very industry based. What sort of an industry one is working in, and what sort of a report needs to be written. So like if we have, for example, we have a narrative report here. So what is meant is, narrative report is most widely used. So here what happens is, like when we talk about any industry, information is always written in a very logical manner, in a sequential manner, in sequences, as things have happened, the way that things have happened, or the way the things needs to be presented, the information needs to be presented, it is presented in a very sequential way. So it could be a case study, any theft, for example, has taken place in any organization. So who has done the theft, where the theft was taken, who did it, everything, all the detailings has to, a report has to be written. So it has to be written in a sequential manner, and it has to be a very formal narration. The format is very, very formal. It cannot be informal, because there's a grave crime that has been committed in an organization. So it follows a certain pattern, and all steps have to be followed accordingly. So as if it is a narrative report, if you have to give a narration of anything, any formal narration, so one has to follow all the steps. There are times when steps can be deleted, certain steps can be omitted, certain steps can be omitted and deleted. Then we have specialized reports. Now what is specialized report? This is a summary of reports about any specialized law enforcement, and this has to do with in the government departments, very specific to the government departments, any law that needs to be enforced, any, there has been a problem in the police department, for example. Now, some reports needs to be mentioned with regard to law enforcements in the police department, for example. So, this narrative could be anything. It could be a narrative. It could be chronological. It could be both also. So, but of course, it has to be very, very descriptive. The entire description has to be there, like what kind of the law needs to be enforced in the police department, and what problems has ensued and what problems have come up, so that we need to have more laws, and those laws needs to be enforced upon, has to be practiced, has to be, people needs to follow, certain laws and rules and regulations. So it could be report can be very, very specialized, very specific to the purpose. So there's a problem, there's a purpose, and that problem needs to be solved. So we can have a specialized reports as well in different, government departments for that matter. Then accident reports. So this could be in the form of any, calamity that has taken place, any mishap. So it is very descriptive again. It would describe the complete accident. Supposedly a report, there has been a loss, a claim has to be made to any insurance company. Supposedly you have to write a report, of accident taken place, and you're claiming certain losses from the insurance company. So you have to exactly write, and be very descriptive where the accident had taken place, and describe the location, where location has to do with the venue, the place, where the accident has taken place, and what losses, if there were any losses that has occurred, and the claims that are made, and obviously it has to be documented, it has to be written down. And then only after that, probably if it is submitted not just to any insurance company, this report can also be submitted to the crime department, to the crime branch, for any investigation that needs to be taken up in the future course. So you see, these reports are so very important part, it's a important part of our everyday life, whether it is organization, whether it is the self that is in trouble, whether it has to do with the formal, the informal, the personal, the impersonal. But report is a true documentation of any information, of any message, anything that we need to convey, and it is always, report is always written and divulged and taken up for a cause. It is always for a cause. Reports are never without a cause. We have non-chronological report. Now, what is meant by non-chronological report? So the purpose is to describe the way things are. Here it could be, it is used in letters, it is used in non-fiction books, information leaflets, and it could be also in the form of catalog. So the opening contains so when you start writing a report, you first do the classification of it. Then of course the subject needs to be described. Then it can be split into various paragraphs, and what is the subject all about, what are the aspects of the subject, and then you mention the conclusion. So you do not follow a chronology here, but of course as and when things have taken place. So, and here report could be in the form of a letters, what you need to understand. It could be also, these are the different forms of report that we are talking about. So catalog, in another words, could also be a report. Letter could also be a report. Non-fiction book could also be a report. An information leaflet could also be a report. So you see, the report also has so many suggestions and so many connotations, So report just does not mean, the format that we follow. The format of a report could also be in the form of letters and books and catalogs. That is what we need to understand here. So, thank you.